As you can see here, I've kind of grouped together all of the close mics, and the overheads are here on this final stereo track, and you can see the close mics are really kept quite soft. But I'm not doing anything different to those than I am to the overheads. They're all being summed through this bus over here. And I should show you the difference perhaps of just the overhead tracks versus the overhead tracks with all of the spot mics in place as well. And it is quite a subtle difference, but hopefully you'll hear the close mics just being reinforced that little bit. So first up is the overhead tracks on their own with no processing. So particularly the stack cymbal is coming through a lot clearer now that we have more level of that coming through the close mic. That's the one which I'm boosting the most. The hi-hat mic doesn't really need to be used so much. The hats are really quite nice and clear in the overheads, but it's there just to give a little bit more directness and a little bit more articulation, especially in a section perhaps like this one over here. I really do like the sound of those overheads. I'm actually really happy with how this came out. So EQ-wise, I'm really not having to do very much to these at all. They already are sitting really nicely. The cymbals are very well represented. Bear in mind, we are mixing through that bit of top-end lift, which is giving some extra brilliance to the cymbals. I'm going to look first at this. I've done just a couple of very small notching EQs, and this is to do with the crash cymbals. Crash cymbals often have, and Chinas can too, and hi-hats, in fact all cymbals can have certain very tight ringing frequencies within them that when you compress the overheads can really come out. And I kind of zeroed in on these two here. So I'm going to find a part where the crash cymbals are being hit with this muted, and then I'll put it on and then I'll unmute it, and hopefully you can really hear the difference. It's just something which you have to use your ear to find, but it's like a really high-pitched whistling noise that's very fatiguing on the ear, and it's very relieving when those get taken out. I'm just going to think of a part. I guess it's on the crash right when it starts. I'll just go back to the beginning now. I'm actually hearing another frequency in there as well now that we're listening back. I'm hearing one, I guess, just a little bit beneath this 3600. Do you hear the difference there? It's quite subtle, actually. I'm not hearing it so much on these monitors. When I was mixing on my headphones, it comes through a lot more clearly. And
I can hear it when you really boost them, and then
oh yeah, when you really boost
take them out, it's a little more obvious.
I don't know how many people really do this. I know most people that I know that mix tend to have some kind of process like this. And when we get to rhythm guitars as well, you'll find that I'm notching out certain whistly frequencies as well. But just taking that out really, you know, if you don't know necessarily what you're hearing, you might try and pull down that whole area. And if you're really trying to get like a cohesive sound from the overheads, you don't really want to have to cut too much into the presence area because the drums are going to really start to sound quite muddy in there. Right. For that reason, I'm not too fond of really bright cymbals, even if they're not too loud. Like Zildjian A customs are really bright cymbals that a lot of drummers really like and a lot of studio engineers really like. But I've often found they don't lend themselves quite so well to getting a cohesive like cymbal and shell sound. However, in this case, just by notching out those frequencies, it's really relieved some of that kind of piercing nature of the crash cymbal on my ears. And if I'm listening to the whole track and I hear more, then I might well go in and notch them. I do also tend to copy those exact channels over onto the room mic tracks as well, because they're getting a lot of cymbals. So once I've kind of found those frequencies, I copy them over. You can see, I think that's the EQ there. It doesn't really matter too much where in the chain they are, and the stock Logic EQ can give you a really, really narrow Q. It's a 100 Q there, so you're really zeroing in on one frequency, and You know, if it was a wider cue, you might want to automate it maybe so that it's only on when that crash cymbal is being hit. But with such a narrow cue, I'm not worried about just leaving that in place the whole time. In terms of actual EQ, this is what I'm doing here. So I am high passing, but I'm not kind of bringing it all up to 500-ish, which would be what a lot of metal producers would do. I'll show you actually what happens as first of all, I'll bypass the cut that we have going on there. But I'm going to bring this up gradually from the lower end of the range and kind of show you what happens, especially to the sound of the cymbals. The main thing which I'm trying to get rid of is any real resemblance of the kick. I don't want to hear that kind of muddying up the overheads at all. So if we start with nothing. Right around there, like the kick drum is really starting to lose its main kind of body. You can still hear the attack, and that's not going to go away, but that's starting to sound really clean to me. Just a little bit further is going to take some of the muddiness out of the snare as well. I don't want to have too much of the body of the snare like down there coming from the overheads. I'm mainly looking for like the airiness that the overheads are picking up. The close mic is going to really reinforce that area too, and too much of that is going to yield maybe a slightly muddy snare sound. It could be great too. To be honest, you could probably not even high pass these overheads. They're really nicely in phase with the close mic, so it's not doing anything bad when you combine them, but to me this is just going to yield a slightly cleaner sound. Actually, listening here now, that to me sounds a bit better, a little bit lower down. I think maybe I was taking a bit too much of it out there, but something that I like to do is listen to the whole drum mix, and this is kind of a luxury you can only afford once you've actually mixed the rest of the drum tracks too. So I do have them mixed ready to go. And I'm just going to do a little bit of jogging around at this high pass frequency with the whole mix going, and you can see how that affects things. It is having quite a profound impact, I think, on like the body of the snare, which is reassuring to me. I like the idea of getting some of that snare sound from the overheads. I'm going to just do that again, and I'm going to try and zero on a frequency where I feel like it's not muddying things, but it is kind of giving it a bit of body.
Like thickness to the snare.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right around there is kind of doing it for me.
Well, if you go much past 200, you really feel it drop out.
Yeah, it's really noticeable, isn't it? It's funny, like, I don't think even I realize sometimes how much of that's coming from the overheads.
Nolly, it seems like that's that sweet spot of that round sound that I was talking about.
Definitely, but I mean, obviously the close mic it's kind of the interaction of the two of them, but yeah, it's really helping. And I love what overheads can bring to a snare sound. To me, it would be a real shame to just use those overhead mics as cymbal mics. If you're going to do that, then set out to do that. But personally, I like to have the overheads functioning to bring a load of air and kind of space to the drum sound, so that it doesn't just sound like really separated, like kick, snare, and toms and cymbals. I kind of like to feel like I'm hearing a whole kit. So yeah, around there was the sweet spot there. And then I saw a need to dip out some of this like 7K area. This would be something that I would have done by ear by shifting it around. Oops, that's not the right thing to do. There we go. And it's mainly when the crashes are playing. You can find that they can really build up a whole load of extra aggression there, and just taking that out there but leaving the top end above it intact, so not low passing, gives you like the shimmery sound from the cymbal up at the top, but it doesn't have the harsh stuff there. I try not to go too far if I can, because that will start to take away some of the power of the drums and the overheads. But we'll just take a listen and see how far we can push that. It's like that nasty area right around there, maybe a little bit lower than I had it even. To me, I kind of almost would describe that area as like brassy sounding. I don't know, there's something like just unpleasant, almost scrapey kind of sounding about it. And taking that out just makes the overhead sound really nice and airy.
Yeah, it sounds like maybe there's clashing overtones in that area or
Yeah.
something.
Maybe there's more notching that I could do as well, but I try to leave those overheads as intact as I can. Now,
That notching that you're doing, is that on all of the, including the spot mics and the
Yep.
overheads?
Yeah. I figure that it's going to be definitely coming, that the spot mics are primarily there to capture the cymbals. There will be plenty of crash coming through in there, but they're also so quiet in the mix that I don't feel like those notches, if they're not necessary, are going to destroy the sound.
Right.
So I'd rather do it with one plug-in here than maybe having it on a couple of them, but not the others. And I've even done mixes where there's been quite a lot of bleed coming through on the snare, and instead of gating it, I've kind of notched out the frequencies like on the drum bus itself.
Oh, really?
And they're so narrow, you're not really going to notice it taking out like much important information of the kit at all. And it can, sometimes the bleed and the other mics can be really building up with that stuff. If we had used like the Sennheiser 421s or something on toms, I think that really tends to exacerbate those kinds of whistly frequencies as well as adding its own. So whenever possible, I like to try and use condensers such as those Josephsons, or actually the C414s that we're using on overheads can make great tom mics as well. They're just really expensive, and you don't want a drummer to hit one of those. They're a little bit bulkier, so I don't even know if there's any drummer that I would let have that particular pair miking their kit. I do like to compress the overheads a little bit, as much for evenness as tone. And here I'm going to use an 1176 style compressor, which is really fast, even with the attack as slow as it can go. And I'm going to start with the mix on 100%. This is something that most 1176s don't have. This plugin they've decided to add on, which is really cool for this kind of usage, because I would really like to try and retain some of that smack of the snare drum. I don't want to compress the overheads until the drums are kind of being brought down in level. But I do want to even out the consistency of the cymbals a little bit, so they're like a kind of more solid shimmer across the top of the mix rather than kind of being distracting in how they come in and out as you move from one cymbal to the other. So without this, it sounds like this. Sorry, just cymbals only. So that's pretty compressed, but that's with the mix on full. As I start to bring back the mix, you'll hear some of that snare spike coming back. Yeah. And we're going to get essentially that compressor is going to fill out the low detail, like all the detailed information is going to come up in volume, but hopefully we're going to retain the transients of the original signal. So we are losing a little bit of the snare level there, but I actually kind of like the character it's imparting. We are also sending it to the parallel drum bus with the extreme compression on it, but I don't want to send too much of that there because that will start to really get pumpy, because it's also going into that with a lot of other instruments playing, like all of the other drums that are being sent there are going to interact with that cymbal sound. So it's kind of nice to have a bit of parallel compression directly on that bus. I don't necessarily want my cymbals to be too pumpy. So the final overhead sound is like this. And note that we are actually getting a decent amount of room slap back into those overheads. Like when I hear that snare, I'm also hearing the way the room interacts with it. We spoke a lot in the segment 4, I guess, about the way that kind of 4-foot rule. It wasn't segment 4, it was segment 3, I guess. Kind of keeping the overheads about 4 feet above the kit gave a really, really good representation of the kit, while also allowing a bit of that room to come back into it. And it's really nice when I hear that. That makes me happy to not hear like a completely dry overhead sound. We've still got all the detail we want on the cymbals, but you are getting some of that kind of life and breath coming back from the room.
How much does that dictate how you use the snare reverb?
Not very much.
Okay.
It's just, especially what I was talking about getting like a really cohesive drum sound. If the overheads are really dry, I find that it can be really difficult to make everything sound really connected. I would get around that, I think, by not high passing as much, letting more of the snare sound come in from that overhead sound. I mean, we're doing a fair bit of that here, but certainly when I've worked in really small rooms, I've tried to use the overheads almost like another pair of room mics, a little bit, yeah. But it's tough. It's a real pleasure to record in a room where you get some more of that kind of information coming back in and get that really coherent sounding kit sound coming from the overheads, not just cymbals.